Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and we're very insulated here in the United States and, of course, Iowa in the Israel, Palestine, Hamas, Hezbollah conflict. We're very insulated, and we don't really understand it that well. When I talk to people over here, it's obvious it's one side or the other on this issue. It's, you're anti-Israel or you're pro-Hamas, and there's literally no room for nuance, which drives me crazy. None of us can actually learn if there's no room for nuance. And so I'm joined today by John Sagherian, the regional director of YFC, which stands for Youth for Christ. And John, first of all, thank you for coming on the show.
It's good to be here, Justin. Thank you.
I've known you for years. I knew you as the missionary guy from when I was at Evangelical Covenant Church on the east side, now called The Well, here in central Iowa. And you were born in, is it Beirut?
I was born in Cyprus.
Okay.
And then my father was a pastor, and we moved back to Lebanon. He moved back to Lebanon when I was 7.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Lebanon, in Beirut.
Yeah. And you still live there.
I do.
And so the reason I wanted to have you on this show is because like I said, there is just no room for nuance here in the United States. You're either against or for Israel. There's no room in between. You're either for Palestine or you're against Palestine. And you have just this amazing nuanced view. And of course, you live over there. And so recently we had the news of a Hezbollah leader being killed in Beirut, which is, first of all, do you know how close that was to your house?
As the crow flies, maybe 2 miles.
2 miles. Yeah. So you're right in the middle of what most of us don't even think about on a daily basis. And it seems like every week is another crisis over in Beirut and over in Lebanon. Of course, I still remember when we were talking after that massive explosion that happened, and we still really don't know what happened there either.
No, we don't.
Yeah, so can you give us kind of a lay of the land and what's going on currently over in Beirut and Lebanon, just from your perspective?
I think for Lebanese, the big problem is the whole mess that our country is in. Started about 4 or 5 years ago. The economy collapsed. The government collapsed. The port explosion that you mentioned. And since then, the politics, the Lebanese pound, lira, has lost 95% of its buying power. Most things have become dollarized now. So people are hurting.
Interesting, yeah.
A lot of people cannot afford even to buy bread. Maybe 70% of the population, or so they say, is under the poverty line.
Really? 70%?
So there's a lot of people who are hurting, and yet you go to the restaurants, and restaurants at night, they're full.
Really?
So there must be people who have enough dollars to go and do that. Banks are not functioning well. People have put their money in the banks, and the bank accounts are locked, so they can't take their money out. So they talk about fresh dollars, which is if fresh dollars come into the bank from outside, then you can take it out. But the dollars that you had in the bank, you can't touch them.
Really?
So it's a mess. But I think a lot of people are hurting that way. A lot of people have left the country for Europe, for the States, Canada, Australia, wherever they go. They can go to the Gulf. And people stay there because they don't have a way to go out.
Right. So we've talked about this issue in the past, and I don't know how much you want to go into on this show. You're more than welcome to go into as much nuance and detail as you want. But like I said at the start of the show, a lot of people have the view that like Israel's either bad or they're good, or Palestine's either bad or they're good, right? And that's it. That's where it stops. There's no room for nuance. But like I said, you have a very different view. You want peace, but also you believe that certain people are too aggressive at times. Can you just give us kind of your perspective? Because I think this helps grow, especially our brains in Iowa, to understand there's not just two sides of this issue.
There aren't. In fact, one of the things I tell people here in the States is when you hear the news, always remind yourself that there is another side to the story. Don't just, even what I say here, don't just take my word for it. Tell yourself there is another side to the story. I think it's easier for us as people, wherever we are, whether we're, Armenian, whether Armenian, Lebanese, Americans, whatever. It's easier to look at things as black and white, and you reject the black and you take the white and finished. But there's a lot of gray in between. People are people. Everybody has mistakes. Everybody has weaknesses. And in the Middle East, in Lebanon, we have suffered a lot.
Yeah.
From the Palestinian presence, from what Israel has done in our country over the years. So I think just to say that this is right, this is wrong, it's not that simple.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because you say you suffered a lot from the Palestinian presence. You've suffered a lot from the Israeli presence. You've suffered a lot. I know that in the past we've talked about Hezbollah presence. That's interesting because most people would say, well, John, it's the Palestinians that you should be concerned about, or it's the Israelis and the IDF you should be concerned about. But you're not. You're concerned about basically getting would it be fair to say, stuck in a war between all these different sides?
Yes, and I don't want to come across as if we're completely innocent. Everybody is guilty. But we've had over 500,000 Palestinian refugees in Lebanon.
Wow.
Since the 40s, since the 50s. They had to leave. They were pushed out of Israel when Israel came in. And they've been living in camps. You look at where they're living, you cannot help but feel sorry for them. Well, they're there, they're armed, they're always hoping they can go back home. And what happens is they start fighting each other and they start fighting Lebanese. That's what I say. We've suffered from that. And then Israel came in the 80s. And since then, many times they bombed different parts of Lebanon because they're trying to get back at Palestinians. Mm-hmm. And we've suffered from that. Yeah, it's not an easy right or wrong. And yes, we want peace, but we want peace with justice. That's the issue.
Yeah,
you cannot just have peace by subverging whatever justice there is.
Yeah. And you know, I don't really ask leading questions because I don't understand. I understand this situation based on reports from you, based on reports from the news, which are usually not very accurate. Generally in Lebanon, in Beirut, there obviously Israel was attacked by Hamas. A lot of people have a really awful time. They'll say like, no. Israel was attacked by Palestine. Like, no, it wasn't. It was attacked by a terrorist organization. And so is there a line, is there an appropriate line where the IDF or Israel has to go after people that are going after them, but then these terrorist organizations are hanging out in what would be considered neutral territory? So is there a correct way to do it? The people in Lebanon, do they think Israel is going too far? Do they think that they should be exercising more caution? Or do they think, hey, it doesn't matter if rocket attacks are coming from in these countries, you should just stay out? Like, how do the locals feel?
I think one of the things that shocks me is the fact that Israel has killed 39,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And nobody says anything about that. 39,000. Many of them are women and children and old people. Where is the moral outrage? Okay, we can say Hamas jumped the gun or, surprised everybody and killed 1,200 Israelis. That was wrong, okay. But that didn't happen in a vacuum. That came out of years of being imprisoned in an open prison called Gaza Strip. Okay, when you say eye for an eye, how many eyes to an eye is it justifiable? 40,000 Palestinians. And Hamas is not Palestinian. I mean, it is out of Palestine, yes. But I heard a radio program recently here in the States where they were equating Hamas and Palestinians. They're not the same.
Correct, they're not.
Same in Lebanon. Hezbollah is a party that comes out of the Shiite community in Lebanon, which is about a third of the population. But they're just a party very well organized, very well armed, very disciplined, but they don't represent the whole population. So let's make sure that we use the right words, the right terms when we talk about these people.
Right. Now, a lot of people, and again, these are issues I don't understand fully. A lot of people have said, well, Palestine, the Palestinians have elected Hamas to lead their country, so it's their fault. They've brought this on themselves. That's one of the views I hear. I don't know how right that is. So is there a view locally that the Palestinians need to rise up right now and overrule Hamas, or else this conflict will continue happening?
It's easy to say that people need to stand up and overrule Hamas. Hamas is a very strong, well-organized group, I think. I mean, I don't know the internal workings of this, but Hamas came into being, from what I hear, is with the help of Israel as a counterpoint to the PLO. Now the PLO, in comparison, is much milder, and it's like they've created a monster. But if they were elected, they were the elected leaders, and everybody in the West said, we're going to boycott you. Well, you either have an election and accept it, or you don't. If we're going to talk about democracy, if you're going to elect somebody, then you're going to accept that as the elected people.
Yeah. What generally, like the Lebanese people, generally what, like, with the constant rocket attacks we see, what do they have an opinion on Israel? Here's how you should handle this situation. Like, do they have any empathy at all? Do the surrounding countries have any empathy that they're getting rockets shot at them all the time? Or is the general lay of the land, even though the rockets are in the sky, this is return fire for the things we don't see? Is that kind of the image, or do they have some sympathy to these inbound rocket attacks? Because we see the Iron Dome, right? We see it constantly intercepting incoming rocket attacks. We see civilian targets targeted. Do the Lebanese people just say, it's tit for tat? This thing's been going on forever. No one's innocent. Or do they see that as targeting of civilians?
I think the Lebanese in general would want to see the war stop.
Right.
We're all losers. And I recently read an article about the Middle East, and it always talked about Hezbollah bombing Israel. It didn't say anything about Israel bombing Lebanon. It's not one-sided. It's tit for tat, as you said. And each time it gets bigger and bigger. Both sides are doing it. And I think a lot of Lebanese, if it was left to them, they would rather have Hezbollah not shoot into Israel, because they would want peace. A lot of us do want peace. But we also realize that there's a lot of injustice going on. It's not simple. That's the thing.
Is there a fear in Lebanon of Hezbollah? Like, do they kind of unofficial? Because I know that your government, if we can even call it that right now, I know that Lebanon's government is kind of eroded. There's not much of it left. So is there concern with Hezbollah essentially replacing the government, or at least unofficially governing Lebanon? Is there concern there?
There is concern, not replacing the government, but there is a concern that maybe Hezbollah is too strong. Well, we haven't had a president for the last almost year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Wow.
Our president is elected by the parliament. And they've been playing games. It goes back and forth every time there's an election. There's no quorum, or we don't get enough votes, and so we don't have a president. The prime minister is a Sunni Muslim. The speaker of the house is a Shia Muslim, and they're both the cabinet that's in place now is an acting cabinet, acting prime minister, because there should be a president that signs off on things. So it's a kind of I call Lebanon as a failed state.
And we heard the rumors that the Israel's airport is being shut down. At least some airlines aren't going to fly there. And there's rumors that maybe Lebanon's airport will be shut down. I know you're going to go back. And so at this point, you don't know if you'll be able to take a direct plane route into Lebanon. So
let me just make a correction.
Yeah,
the airports are not shut down.
Right. It's just for certain airlines.
There are some airlines that have said they are suspending their flights into into Beirut, for example, until, like Lufthansa, which is what I fly, it's suspending its flights until August 5. Now, will they resume after that, or will they extend that deadline? And I think it's the same with Tel Aviv. So
obviously, you're at Youth for Christ. What's the Christian view on this? What is the church, the people that you're ministering? This is your job. You're a missionary over into Lebanon, your home area, your home city of Beirut. What's the Christian perspective on this? Does this change the way you work? Does it not change the way you work? Or is the Christian perspective, the ministry perspective, essentially, hey, this kind of conflict has been happening for tens of thousands of years. It's going to keep happening. What's the Christian perspective?
One of the points I make when I speak about this is to say this: the ground is level at the cross. There is no difference between Arab and Jew, Armenian and American, European and African. We all need Christ. And I think the Christians need to realize, okay, you can have a view as to which side is right, maybe, but remember that everybody needs Christ, whichever side they are. And I think in light of eternity, that is more important.
And so it's kind of like, be aware of the news, be aware of the news cycle. That's fine. Be aware that there are multiple sides to every story, much of which you probably don't know. History is littered with examples of main news narratives that were completely wrong. And so it's, despite that, is there an aggressor? Maybe. It's maybe hard to know who that is, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because everyone still needs Jesus. And this is the stance of YFC and what you're doing.
Yes. And I mean, my work is with young people, teenagers in the Middle East. Yes, I tell them about Jesus, and I tell them that he is the one that has come to give us life. And when it comes to things like this, I say, Lord, have mercy. I mean, I look at some of the countries around me, like Sudan, the civil war that's going on. It's horrible. Lebanon, Palestine, Armenia, Ukraine. Lord, have mercy.
Yeah.
It's enough killing, enough destruction. And I'm afraid that that's never going to stop until Jesus comes back. But meanwhile, we can still hope for peace. We can still pray for peace. And we can still pray for the people who are in trouble and help them in any way we can, whichever side they are.
And so you're basically, from a YFC and a ministry standpoint, taking neutral ground and saying, hey, we know there are aggressors. We know there's injustice. We're always going to side with those that are hurting and those that need Jesus all the time, whether they be Palestinian, whether they be Israeli, whether they be Lebanese, whether they be Ukrainian, whether they be Russian. They all need Jesus. And we're going to help those that are hurting, period. End of story.
Amen.
Yeah. What can people over here in Iowa, obviously the U.S., but what can those of us in Iowa do to help? Because we seem kind of helpless. We don't understand the political landscape. We hear multiple viewpoints from our lawmakers. And rather than getting stuck in the finger pointing, what do we actually do to bring peace, to bring healing over to Palestine, over to Israel, over to Lebanon, and maybe even Ukraine and Russia, which I know you don't live in those areas. I think YFC does have a presence there. But
yes, they do.
Yeah, what is something we can actually do?
I think on an individual level, stay informed. Like I said, tell yourself there is another side to the story. Where can I find that?
Yeah.
Be informed and then pray. Somebody once said, I watch the news so I will know how to pray. Sometimes the news gets you depressed. That's true. but that will give you some indication of where you can pray, what direction you can pray. And then there's always a need out there. So find out people that you can trust, and through them, send help. And yeah, don't be so adamant about one side being right, the other side being wrong. Everybody needs help. Everybody needs Jesus. Everybody needs peace, wherever they are.
Yeah. Even from a personal side, like individual relationships I know over here that I know the full history of, two individuals that hate each other. Even in those situations when I can trace back the whole history of the conflict and I know who they are, I know who their families are, I don't even know who started that. You know what I mean? It's some of this stuff. Are we ever going to figure out who's on the right side of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? Probably not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Sorry.
It's always, yeah. A friend of mine would say, it depends on where you start your history.
Yeah.
Like even this conflict did not start on October 7th.
Right.
You can go back 10, 15, 50 years back. So every conflict, it depends on where you start history, will give you a different perspective.
When friends tell us, like, because this happens a lot now, friends will tell us over here in the United States that, you need to take a side. Otherwise, you're ignoring the people that are getting hurt. They want to pull us over to their viewpoint. And they want us to agree with them. Otherwise, we're the aggressor and we're causing the problem, right? Because everybody wants, they want to recruit people to their point of view. When I'm sure you get this a lot, especially in your job. People are like, John, you need to understand that, this viewpoint is correct. And you need to, you have a platform, John, and you need to go out there and you need to talk about this platform that's correct. What do we as Iowans, and what do you, and by the way, I should mention, you married an Iowa girl, Nancy, and she's since passed many years ago. We miss her dearly. But so that's your connection to the state. What do we do? Like when people try to recruit us to one side or the other, do we just say, hey, I'm not going to take a side? Sometimes that feels like we're opting out of conflict. How do we approach that discussion with our friends?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question.
It is. That's why I asked you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really hard.
Try to stay neutral, but say there are some things that are true and some things that are not. For me, the Bible is true. So if somebody comes and says something against the Bible, then I won't accept it. Of course, the Bible is without mistakes, but interpretation of the Bible is fallible. So we need to be careful there. Don't take sides. Look at people as people. Try to help people as people. There are some things you don't need to take sides, but you can always pray.
Yeah, that is true, actually. There are some things you don't need to take sides, but you can always pray. What else? This is, like I've told you before, this is a hard issue for me because I don't fully understand it. The conflict goes back a long time. What else do Iowans need to know? I know that's really open-ended, but you're sitting here putting your hands up. I don't know. It's a really tough issue, and I just feel like so many people just write it off, and they're like, well, this is what the news says, this is what my congressperson says, and these other people are bad. And, is there more to add to it, or is it that simple? Just, you can take you can take the side of peace and not take the political side.
I think that's the thing. I think we should all want peace, but we should all want justice also. And we got to trust God that He knows what He's doing. We need to trust His wisdom and ask Him to use us any way He wants to use us. Let's be flexible in His hands. It's easy to say, I won't take this side and the heck with everybody else.
Right.
But I don't think that's the way that the Lord would do it.
Right. What are the priorities right now of YFC and you? What are the projects you're working on right now? What are like your top things you're working on? And how can we help as Iowans to help you accomplish those things?
Well, my responsibilities in the Middle East, North Africa, the region where I'm the regional director, is to meet with the leadership of YFC in these countries, do any training they've asked me they need, meet with the boards, help them with their strategizing for their country. And whenever I can, speak to young people about Jesus. I love doing that. So my priority is make sure that I don't get involved in politics, but that I preach Jesus.
Yeah. And what are those? I mean, just those are the priorities, or are there any priorities we can help with over in Iowa here? I don't know what those would be. Yeah. I know this is like we talked about doing this, and I know this is a really, really tough topic. And so I obviously appreciate you giving me and giving the Iowa listeners some of your time in such it's really, really a tough area, especially because you do have to go back, and you don't want to obviously say things that get you into trouble. So,
that's true.
Yeah. So I appreciate you giving us, the fact that it's not always as cut and dry as you may think. And so, any parting words before we close the show?
Just thank you for listening to me. Thank you for giving me a chance to say some things. Just remember some of the things I said, that people are people, they all need Christ.
Yeah.
And that there's always another side to the story that you hear, even the side that I have given.
Yeah.
So have an open mind, help when you can, pray when you can.
Yeah. Last time we spoke, you were doing a lot of meal kits, because this was right. Last time we spoke about, and you and I speak often, but last time we spoke about current events, it was when that explosion happened, and you were handing out meal kits to people who needed them, people who had no food. So is there what's the way people can donate to YFC? Because you're doing this kind of stuff constantly over in the Middle East, helping people that don't have food, helping people that don't have resources. If people want to contribute to that, what's the most direct path?
Well, you can contact Youth for Christ International, and then choose the country that you're interested in, whether that's Lebanon or any of the Middle East countries, and make a contribution to it.
And what's the official website so people don't go to the wrong spot?
YFCI.org.
Perfect. YFCI.org.
Yeah.
John Sagherian, Regional Director of YFC. Thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast.
Thank you.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.